Credit and the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioners Continuing Education Unit will need to stay for 1 hour. And when the session's over, there'll be someone in the back that'll scan your badge. So get your questions questions ready, and that'll help us get to the 1 hour session time because we do have to have that 1 hour before you can get that credit. So without any further ado, let me please give a warm welcome to Ms. Christina McKinney, Chief Standards and Analyst Division, InfoSec, Defense Information Systems Agency. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Everybody hear me? Is that better? Okay. Here we are after lunch. Hopefully everybody's nice and alert. I'll try to keep you alert. I'm always alert when the subjects of STIGs come up. I would like to ask, are most of you, hold your hand if you're familiar with STIGs or SRGs. Excellent. I'm going to assume that that's all fan mail, right? So everybody likes them, everybody wants more. That's I'm counting on that, okay? I am Chris McKinney of DISA. I'm Chief of the Cyber Standards and Analysis Division. My team is responsible for the development, the maintenance, and the automation. Those are the three key areas of security standards. These are foundational documents for getting the key protections in place. I sometimes think it's like being a fire marshal. You know, a lot of the glory these days goes to the firefighter, and they deserve it, the cyber warrior who's out there doing the things that cyber warriors do. But we all know, I believe, that fire marshals save a lot of lives too, because we protect, and then sometimes things go wrong, and you certainly need that other kind of professional, but it's good for us to work together. So very foundational, very critical, kind of a low glory area, but you really notice it when it doesn't happen. So I want to walk us through just kind of what the STIGs and SRGs are, where we are with it, just give you a good overview. I hope it's a good overview. Allow you an opportunity to talk to me about any of your questions or concerns. I will warn you up front that I have a couple of really smart people with me up front, so I may tap them if it gets excruciatingly technical, because I've got some really great technical folks here. But I think I should be able to manage most of your questions. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get along. The agenda in general, what I'm supposed to do is look at the screen, but advance it from over here, so I can do that. By what authority? You know, this is the thing that I like to say about the STIGs in general. My main constituent is that hardworking SA or network administrator who comes in every day and wants to know what to do, how to do it, and if they care, I'll also tell them why and by what authority. So the STIGs are established, and the SRGs are established in authority. We'll go over that. We have a key automation effort that's going on. I'll describe where we are with that and where we're going. And the main thing I want to make, and it's toward the end of the discussion, but it's the biggest point. You know, I can say to you, and it's true, I have 300 STIGs and checklists, and with my traditional checklist, I have 151 checks and 400 pages of supporting documentation. That's not what this is all about. It's the so what factor. What is the impact? What is the impact of having secure configuration guidance in place? STIGs are all about operationally implementable, secure configuration guidance. And I will have one slide in here that tells you, or I'll discuss it anyway, what STIGs aren't, because they've been around for a long time. I've had my hands on them in one way or the other for more than 20 years now, because the MVS STIG was our very first publication. It's changed a lot over the years, so it's become a lot of things to a lot of people, and we'll talk about that. So mostly that's a good thing, but sometimes it's good to get back to the basics and say, what's the purpose of having a STIG or a security requirements guide? So the key takeaway on the authority slide, do that. The director of DISA has both the authority and the responsibility in the areas cited here. The STIGs are developed, maintained, produced, disseminated by DISA on behalf of the DoD. Now, I can tell you that STIGs are used for far beyond DoD, but I do sometimes get out there and have someone say DISA STIGs. Yes, DISA produces the STIGs, but they're producing them on behalf of the DoD, and they're used throughout DoD. So I just wanted to have that little point of clarification. That's kind of the says who. It goes along with the so what, okay? This next slide is just kind of a quick one, really, because there's a lot more going on in my particular division of the Risk Management Executive's Office than STIGs and SRGs, but those are the main things. We develop and maintain the Security Requirements Guides, which is a higher-level overarching document, the Security Technical Implementation Guides. The guidance is used in a number of ways, just as I said, for the constituents out there who are trying to know how to configure their systems. It's used in cyber readiness inspections, and we also find that it's very helpful in using for CNA decisions and helping risk managers make risk-based decisions. And our recent initiative, I guess it's been a couple of years now that we've been working with vendors. We also have working with vendor-specific STIGs. We've been working with vendors all along, actually. It's the vendor-specific products and developing those products. So the key takeaway, again, is develop and disseminate operationally implementable secure configuration guidance for use throughout DoD. So that's policy and operations, that intersection. There's a lot of guidance out there in the world, and it's good. I'm not in any way complaining about it, but it doesn't tell you what to do and how to do it. And that's the primary goal that I have with putting out the STIGs. We also have some other functions in the division, but the ones we're going to focus on today are these standards-based activities. All right. The priorities that DISA has that we support, again, many priorities, but the priorities that we support specifically in DISA as they evolve are the Joint Information Environment, and because that's an emerging environment, those STIGs are a work in progress. Sometimes the architecture changes, and so the STIG has to change as well. And I just finished one, I guess, last week, and we'll wait now for this to mature a little bit more, and then we'll continue to update. A big one for us right now is the cloud. The cloud is a security requirements guide. It's a little bit different. We worked all through the holidays last year and published the first security requirements guide in January. I believe it was mid-January last year. And version 2 just got out very recently, a week or so ago. So that's published out on the Information Assurance Support Environment, and I would encourage anybody who cares about how we're approaching cloud security to take a look at that. I would say that a cloud security summit or a set of briefings about cloud security can take a couple of days. You've got a lot of vendors, you've got a lot of smart technical people, there are a lot of moving parts to getting that all working. So it's not something that you could just run through quickly, but it is one of our major undertakings at this point in time. We also have, per the DISA Director, General Lynn's priorities, work going on now in the software-defined networking area. So we will, as we typically do with new or emerging technologies or approaches, we'll be writing STIGs, developing STIGs, working with that program and process as it is unveiled. Okay? So let me get here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go through some of the detailed purpose on the STIG. The STIGs and their accompanying parent security requirements guides define IA or cybersecurity configuration standards and security processes for the entire DoD. They essentially represent a compendium of DoD policy, and I cite that primarily as DoD 8500 and CNSS 1253. And by the way, I was briefing a new leader as we were working on some of the cloud stuff. And we were telling them there was a little bit of a delta between current controls and our controls. And this individual thought that when we said 1253 controls, that there were 1,253 controls. So he felt better when we were only off by like 20, because it sounded like such a big number. So unless you live in that world, you might not be really familiar with those controls. So we have a primary source. We have many sources, but I'll list some of the primary sources. The policy, we're trying to address emerging threat vulnerabilities, including IAVAs. You know, there's a process. How does an IAVA get into a STIG? You know, there's something that comes out, and then over our period of time of updating, we can get that information and that requirement into the STIG. Bulletins, technical advisories, communication tasking orders, CTOs, and then, of course, we care very much about industry best practices, and I think some of our public-private partnerships are really paying off for us now as we're starting to get traction in the vendor-developed STIGs, and I'll go into that just a little bit later. Going back to the JIE environment, cloud services, mobility, virtualization technologies, you know, we're working fast and furiously in all of those areas. We definitely are wanting for people to be able to optimize their investments, so we're working with commercial vendors and we're collaborating with teams. I don't know if any of you attended the Secure Host Baseline panel earlier this morning, but there's a STIG component to that, and the collaboration with a vendor in order to do testing and building and testing before a new product is released. It's a great way to then have your security configuration guidance ready to roll whenever the product is released or shortly thereafter. So that's one of our goals, and I think the Secure Host Baseline is a really good example of how that collaboration with government, multi-agency collaboration with government entities as well as private industry is working out for us. Various members of the STIG team participate and are major participators and have been there from the beginning in looking at the consensus working group and these consensus efforts. And with those groups, they're looking at Air Force, Army, Marine, Homeland Security, NSA, Department of State, Department of Justice, and then the collaboration with the vendors. So sometimes a vendor will ask me, they come to me about generating a vendor-developed STIG, and they'll kind of ask the question, as they should, well, what's in it for me? You know, why should I spend some resources developing a product-specific STIG? And one of the things I share with them is what other vendors have said. A very well-known, well-regarded database company said to me one time in the midst of 3 days worth of very intense work on the settings, you know, you guys have made our product a lot better. And that made me feel good because it was obviously meeting our goals, but it also let me know that they got some return on investment. It's not just the DoD customers, maybe it's not just the federal customers, you know, it may be going out throughout businesses and industry as well. That's your decision. That's not one for me to make. I'm just saying it's been made back to me that yes, you might involve some putting some resources into something, but you might be able to leverage that out because we all know that the banking industry cares, and you know we're being asked to share across Department of Homeland Security and a number of other business spaces and federal spaces that it might be to your benefit and your advantage to work with us on developing STIGs, if you so desire. And we'll go through. I'll just show you a picture of what that process is at some point in time. We have a fairly robust, repeatable, scalable set of processes. I have a list of things I'm working. We know how to kick one off. I'll look at the process for you. It's why we're able to maintain and keep up to date with over 300 STIGs and checklists. Having said that, it is also a flexible process. The things I care about and push my team for, and I believe they deliver on, is agility, speed, and automation. And on the agility factor, it means when something new comes out, even though I'm already doing quarterly releases, we publish a STIG and I do quarterly releases for maintenance, if something comes out that means that STIG needs to be updated, we can do it right away. I have a couple of examples that come to mind. We had the secure host baseline going. We published on a very aggressive schedule. By the time Microsoft had done their release, within 3 weeks we had the STIG done, and then also within 3 weeks after that, we had the benchmark, so the automation was done. So that was a very aggressive schedule. Occasionally something will come up that is determined to be, you need an update. We updated version 1 right away. A little while back in the application development STIG, we had advocated with the community to have automated code checking as something that would be stated. And we got a lot of pushback at that time from the community that the product suite for automated code checking was not mature, it was expensive, they weren't funded for it, and we backed off of that at that point in time and said, okay, well, the code checking, you still have to do it, but we're not going to say automated code checker. And maybe a year ago, I can't remember the exact date, I got one of those blazing notes. You don't really think of a STIG as being an emergency kind of activity, but this emergency STIG activity from OMB that said, be sure and put in something about automated code checking. So I think it took Julie, who's in our office, about 15 minutes to go pull up the narrative that had been in the STIG, put it back in, do a notice out on IASC, and from that moment forward, we had it where OMB had directed us to put it. That kind of agility and a quick turn is something that I think is valuable about the STIG process, even though the typical process may take a lot longer than that. If there's a reason for emerging threat or for a requirement from above, it's a good thing to be able to move fairly quickly. Same thing is true with regard to STIG development that may be something that wasn't on our list at all. You know, the way we have worked in risk management and within this community for the past almost, 20 years, the STIGs are the foundation. Those STIGs help inform the training. The STIGs help inform the tools that we build or buy. The STIGs help inform certification. They also move down the line and are used very much so in inspections. And then we all know that sometimes things happen no matter what. And those incident response, we have red team and forensics and incident response folks. And that can feed that loop back to me. My first question is, whatever happened, was it covered in the STIG? Or is it something new? Because I want to know. I want to know right away. Did we miss something? Is it something new? Or did they fail to implement something that they had already been told to implement? So having that kind of continuum with the STIG, which sounds a little bit like a boring policy document, having an impact on all those more operationally focused activities has turned out to be beneficial. And I also want to make a plug for the compliance term, because people talk about compliance as if it were some boring old thing that you just do because of a report, FISMA or some, and I'm fine, you know, we all have our reasons for doing what we do. If it's based in public law, most of us are going to do it. But when I'm talking about STIG vulnerabilities and settings and secure configuration, I'm talking about protecting ourselves from exploitable vulnerabilities. That's what we're doing here. These are things that are exploitable, and that's why we're going through what may be inconvenience of setting up the STIG and implementing the STIG. And you know, by the way, it's not just a noun, it's a verb, it's an adverb. You know, you STIG the box, and have you STIG'd that? And I've taken a few additional graduate courses and find that they're talking about STIGging stuff. So it's actually become an activity that is beyond just a document or a checklist. But the point I'm making is it's not just compliance. There's nothing wrong with compliance, but we're talking about preventing some really bad stuff from happening. And I've got a few metrics on that when I start talking about impact. We've got a lot of users out there. We field, I don't know, maybe 4,800, 5,000 customer questions throughout the course of a year, and we try to get. We don't have a time frame that it must be done, but we have a quick turn on that, have a little bit of an entry point, and then I try to get it to the subject matter expert to do the research, to find out an answer, and get that back to the folks who are trying to ask the question. A lot of our work there may come from a reviewer, may come from an inspector. but it also comes from people who are just trying to set up their systems. I do want to take just one moment to talk about what a STIG is not, because I think it's a value, and when you have something that you produce a value, it may start to be used for a whole bunch of different things that it wasn't originally intended for. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's great, but I will say that it's not the APL. The STIG is not the approved product list, okay? The STIG is not NIAP. The STIG is not JITIG interoperability testing. The STIG is not supply chain risk management, and the STIG is not the FIPS 140 process. Those are all very valid activities. The STIG is operationally implementable secure configuration guidance. So I think it's important, especially with a vendor, like for us to say, and I feel strongly enough about what it's not, that I'm putting that in when a vendor comes in to try to say, I want to work with the STIG. Okay, just remember, this is what the STIG is, in case they've been talking with someone or thinking about something. And I can't stop, nor do I want to try to stop, anyone from saying, I want something that's got a STIG, or I've STIGged this, and I insist that you do the STIGging. That's okay, that's a good thing. But I need to bring it back into what is the STIG, what was it designed to do. It's an operationally focused document. It is not pre-acquisition. It is operations. So just point of clarification in case you can't tell. I get some questions on that. I think they're fair questions, but I wanted to provide some clarification there. And then I think back also with regard to the goals. Intrusion avoidance, again, I'm talking about exploitable vulnerabilities, intrusion detection to assist with that, and because we're all about operations, response and recovery. Restoral to operations is very important, and if we can get some lessons learned out of it, that's another good thing. Back in the early days of doing incident response, I can't tell you how many times the guys would go out and they would come back and they said that everything was set up properly, but somebody wasn't responding. The logs would be filling up and the alerts would be going off, and so I feel like it's kind of like my thoughts on sensors. We have a big sensor program that I'm very fond of, and I would always say that the sensors need to be properly placed, properly tuned, and properly responded to. And now I've added properly sized, because I saw somewhere that there was these 10 gig circuits and the sensors were smaller and stuff was falling all over the floor. So the idea of having someone know to respond and how to respond when something is happening. Otherwise, the person who has set it up did it right, but no one's doing anything about it. So this is part of it. It's not the whole picture, but it's part of it. To another slide here. It's a little bit of a busy slide, but I do think it tells a pretty good story. The main thing is at the top. The STIGs are mapped to the 853 controls. So the policy is there. We have the DoD directives and instructions. We have other policy out there. We certainly have CTOs. We have the Common Correlation Identifier that helps us build the SRG, policy. We have technical and policy. And over on the side, I've just kind of listed the acronyms, and I'm going to go back and go through those later, simply because it's part of how we do the automation. So I have that explanation back there as well. From the parent SRG, the STIGs are derived. So there, you can see there's several different layers that come down from big policy, more specific to DoD, overarching policy, and then the specific checklists or configuration guidance that come under those policy documents. Okay? And again, some of those questions I'm asking are, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do it? Why and by what authority? Now, one point that I will make, because people do care, and I'm glad they care, about inspections, the authority resides in the STIGs and the SRGs, both. If there is not a specific STIG that is involved in an area, the SRG can be used to assist with evaluating or assessing. So I just wanted to kind of point that out because there have been questions about it. What do you do? I signed out an SRG this past week on an area that's near and dear to my heart that may not mean much to anybody else in here, and that's mainframes. You know, people say, mainframes? Are there still mainframes? I had that happen to me recently in the Pentagon. I was in the Pentagon, and someone said, mainframes? Are there still mainframes? And we have worked hard. In fact, one of our early vendor partnerships was with the mainframe folks. They knew their products inside out. We knew security inside out. And the software developers were doing some tweaking, and we worked together to come up with, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 or 13 product-specific, but that SRG, there's a whole bunch of other stuff out there that the SRG is used when there is not anything product-specific. And, of course, I think we all know from some of the events that have happened recently, it's not that the mainframe themselves are so vulnerable, but that data contained there is extremely valuable. And cleaning up something that involves a breach of data that would be residing in a mainframe is extremely costly and disruptive. Back in the old days, when we've been doing this for a long time, you just about have to have a physical breach or a battering ram or something to go in and get at your mainframes. That's just not true anymore because they're going out and getting patches and they're doing various things. And so it's important to have that DoD data, not just systems, not just networks, but DoD data protected as best we can. And this SRG helps to facilitate that. It's not a be-all and an end-all, but it helps to facilitate it. Just general types of STIGs, policy and architectural. We have this traditional and physical security. It's a STIG. It's a checklist. This is an area that there's some contention and controversy. I understand that. We've been struggling with it for a long time. There is an overlap in some areas between that physical, traditional, PDS, hot wall jack, the kind of typical is the back door propped open with the brick kind of stuff, tailgating to get in, and the technical, because we care if someone social engineers their way into a physical facility, plugs into a hot wall jack, and exfiltrates all kinds of data. There's more than one rice bowl at stake. So we've worked very well with the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for National Intelligence on working on this checklist and making sure that we have the lines of authority delineated and that we are in agreement with the big working group on what those checks should be. And one of the problems with this is probably a problem in every area is, sometimes you just don't have the money to do the upgrades with the physical infrastructure. But I do believe, again, if you look back at some of the incidents that have happened, that traditional and physical security continues to be important. Other policy and architectural would be the traditional the facilities, and then the network infrastructure policy. On the technical side, we have essentially 3 different kinds of STIGs. So just to kind of put them in big buckets, my team, which is made up of both government and contractors, the cyber standards team authors those STIGs, the bulk of our STIGs, with appropriated funding. That's our mission space. That's what we do. The second category I've been referring to is the vendor-developed STIGs with the assistance from the team. There's a process that's very well outlined at this particular site, a vendor intent form, so the vendor can let us know that they're interested in working with us, and I have that whole process mapped out. This is just the higher level discussion of the process. And then, which I have referred to earlier, would be the consensus design STIGs, which would be partnering with the military services, peer federal agencies, and other stakeholders. All of these kinds of STIGs are NIST 853 sourced. So we're going back to that. And I just like to map it back there so that there's not any misunderstanding about where that's coming from. All right. This outlines what I would call the standard, regular, my team develops a STIG. The first thing is the scoping, where we sit with the team and discuss the scoping mechanism, how much it's going to cover, the kinds of, if you will, what problem are we trying to solve, what's the configuration guidance that's so key here. And then we use the STIG template and the SRG, under an SRG family, technology specific and based on the NIST 853 controls. So that's the next step in the process. Beyond that, we have a refinement process for the configuration statement. Then, after we've got this configuration guidance outlined, we have a check and fix procedure. You know, I need to be able to check it, I need to be able to fix it, and then on down the process, we've got this automation piece, and then you'll be able to see where you stand if you're using it for certification or if you're using it for an inspection. Then the community review process, and this is something that I think is really important to point out. We have technical interchange meetings. We get comment periods after the STIG has been posted in draft. We solicit and we receive comments. I'm not sure, maybe there are thousands of people on the list. I'm not sure how many it goes out to. 16,000 people that have signed up to be on the list. So there's no such thing when I get out of an elevator in the Pentagon or one of the headquarters and someone says, well, you know, we didn't have a chance to weigh in on that. Well, maybe you personally didn't weigh in on it, but we do have a process by which we put the STIG out, we put the STIG out for comment, we have a comment period, and then we adjudicate those comments. Every one of those comments is reviewed and adjudicated. Once that's taken place, we go through the approval process, we package it up, we put the package together. It goes into the individual that is allowed and has the authority to sign the STIG. Now, again, it's vested in the DISA director, but typically, since I've been doing this, we would have maybe a 1-star, maybe an 06. At one point in time, for a short period of time, it was an ops chief, and ever since then, it's been an SES. It's an SES level person. It's not the person who is the authorizing official for RMF or for CNA. They may be dual-hatted for some period of time, but the STIG process typically comes down through that operations channel, and it is a specific designation of authority to sign that out. Then we publish the STIG. We get that out again on our main listing of notices would be out on the information assurance support environment. We also use other mechanisms for getting the word out. So for the most part, anybody who wants to know and keep up with STIGs, they're on the STIG mailing list, or they watch DISA Dateline, or they look at some of the other mechanisms for getting the word out. You'll know whenever a new STIG or whenever a new SRG has been published. That seems to be working fairly well. And I think the strength of this process is that we do have the community comment. We do have the service and agencies and the stakeholders have a chance to weigh in with their operational concerns or any other concerns that they may have about that STIG. Now, to take a look at the vendor STIG process, it's a little different, and it may be of most interest to this audience because obviously I see there's going to be a lot of vendors here. If someone's interested in going through the process of having us work with them to create a STIG, this is pretty much what is outlined to do. So I'm going to go through this process, the planning phase, and you will already have send in your vendor intent form. You will let us know that you're interested in working with us to write a STIG. We will get a subject matter expert, which may very well be one of my contract teams, and a government POC on the government team. We will provide all of the materials that you need to know over what it's going to take to create and publish a STIG. Everything about that process, detailed instructions, explanations, questions answered. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 phone calls. Jackie and Ricky, we've done that on a number of occasions. We may get together in person. It's not necessary to sit across the table, but we frequently do. That's not a requirement. Then as we begin to develop the STIG, we look at the requirements analysis. Again, we have to look at those check and fix procedures. We look out, because the vendor is doing so much of this themselves with their own product, we also have our own subject matter experts working hand in hand with them to do this development and to answer any questions on their side or on our side about what this is going to look like. And then the vendor submits what they would like to see and what they believe are the key components for that particular submission. Then the team validates that. There is a STIG review. We have some simulation testing. We don't test everything, but if you say you can do something and you can make a setting a certain way, we want to do some testing to make sure that that can actually be done. And then we have all the reviews of the technical team of the vendor-provided documents. So they may have a hardening guide already. They may already have a lot of material that they're using for their securing their product. So we want to take a good hard look at that. And then we have an internal review, and it's, I don't want to call it a murder board, but it sure feels like that. It gets pretty tough in looking at, because being operationally focused, we don't want too much because we don't want to slow anybody down. We don't want to add anything that isn't critical, but we don't want to leave anything out. So that is important to the DoD community. So we will review it because, again, we're going to try to get things moving toward perhaps an automation end state at some point in time. And we'll review it just so that it's consistent in format and style and is easy enough for anyone who looks at it to know how it's laid out and how to go look for the things that you want in it. And then we will brief the risk management executive. That's at this point in time. There have been times when I've been involved in this process that we would go to the ops chief, which was also fine, and that would be the person who had the vested authority to sign out the document. And we would notify, we get a decision. Sometimes we get sent back to the drawing board. There may be something in that package that is missing or that they don't like, or they may just have additional questions that normally we could answer, but if we can't answer them, we're going to go back and get the answers. And at some point in time, then, pretty quickly, we get a decision, we get an approval, and at that point we notify the vendor that the STIG is complete and is ready for publication, and then we will go ahead and push it out the door and make the publication official. Now, people do ask me, and it's a very good question about how long that can take. We're very dependent on the vendor getting back with us. You can send out a vendor intent form. We're going to devote resources. We're not charging you to do this, of course, but we're just devoting resources to gearing up, doing the research, doing the homework, having the subject matter experts available. And if for any reason, funding, operations, priorities, the vendor doesn't get back with us, we will reach out to a couple of times and say, do you want to put this away? You want to come back another time? Because we do want to keep it moving as well. But I can't tell you a specific timeline because we will be very much dependent on working collaboratively with the vendor, and it will often be whatever they can assign in terms of resources with this process. And this is a relatively new process. I think I have, help me out, 33 vendors. That was the number I had. Today, I've had other people approach me, and I've kind of sent them to the appropriate sites and exchange a couple of cards because they believe it would be to their advantage to have DoD security standards built into their products, and this is a way for them to do that. So I will leave that as far as what the value is to each individual vendor. We really like the collaborative effort. We think that we have a better product when we work together, and so I just want you to know that you, for the most part, I think you would find a warm welcome if you reached out and wanted to work with us. We're not completely without resource constraints, so obviously we can't do everything for everyone, but we make a good effort to respond to the requests of the vendor community. The other third process, which we touched on, would be, the consensus process, and that, again, is like the secure host baseline. We have Microsoft, we have other vendors that we have consensus approaches on. It's also working very well. That is yet another way to get DoD-wide participation with the services, with the agencies, with the stakeholders, to do some fairly heavy-duty tweaking and testing and getting those dials just right for these various products so that it potentially can have a really broad use. You know, one of the things I get when, I'm sure most of you know Richard Hale, and one of the things that he has always said since I've been working with him, which is many, many years, he would really like, in a perfect world for him, he'd really like to have this STIG stuff going on in a lab, and anything that came out was a pristine baseline, and that's what you used in DoD. Now, we're not going to get there. The missions are just too different. The requirements are too different. But I think that the secure host baseline is a step in that direction, and you're able to leverage the standardization. You're able to leverage keeping up with the versions, keeping up with any of the updates, and having the key components included in a framework or a build from image, even if it isn't a once and done, one size fits all, which might just be a bridge too far. Before I worked for DISA many years ago, I worked for Army, and there's a lot of nooks and crannies in Army. In the architecture, it would be really hard to have one thing that would work for everyone. But it's the more you can standardize it, you're going to have economies of scale. It's going to be easier to maintain, and from my perspective, you're going to be able to build in better security. So the consensus process is going on. Most of you are going to be somewhere, have your hands on the Win 10 rollout, and you're going to be impacted by that. It's a lot of new ground. We've been working consensus. I think, Ricky, you've been doing it for 10 years. You were the very first consensus effort with Air Force. We've had good participation and good products coming out of it. But with Win 10 being as complicated as it is, and with Microsoft's model being as it is, and with this widespread adoption and with a very aggressive timeline, plus some hardware implications, we've got our work cut out for us. I think it's the right thing to do, and we're going to meet those milestones. But it is a good example of consensus work, and we have others as well. We have Red Hat, we have Apple, yeah. So we have vendors that want to work with us in the consensus space. Right. The thing that I also want you to put into the mix here, I've talked about STIG development, and I didn't put a slide in for STIG maintenance. I'll do that next time I'm putting together a chart, because that is another key component. This stuff changes pretty fast. And I laugh at my policy buddies, and I'm not complaining, but I was working with something that had a policy implication, and they said, you know, we're going to publish this policy next week. I said, really? How long has it been in the works? Because I knew it had not been done in the whole time I'd been working with them. 7 years for the policy document, and then they were going to start on the implementing guidance. And I just don't live in that world. You know, with technology moving so fast, I feel like, and I'm sure my people say the same thing, I'm always pressuring them to go faster and faster and faster to keep up with these changes. And I certainly would say that in the mobility space, but it's true in almost every area that we work. So to have a repeatable, rigorous, robust process that moves right on through to get a product out the door and in use to securely configure things, there's two things I need to be able to do. One is if it turns out there was something that I missed from some other source, of all these sources that we look at, I need to be able to fix it and update it pretty quickly. And then, you know, the other thing is emerging threats, because things happen that you need to update something. So the notion that I was going to have to take 7 years and that it was a policy document just doesn't fit the model for us. And I'm not putting down my brethren in the policy area. It's extremely important. It all starts with policy, so I'm not putting that down. I just need more agility in this particular space. And it's kind of a gap that the STIGs have filled all these years. And we continue to try to do that. So the maintenance part is well, that was a segue. You all need to get an hour of CPEs, right? So I'm going to go through that. I'll take a little bit of time to run through this. The maintenance part is also very critical. You know, it's another one of those low glory activities. You know, it's a little bit of a buzz to at least get a STIG out the door and get it posted, and everybody's got it, and people were waiting for it, and now they're going out and running with it. But I sign out quarterly maintenance releases, plus anything that came up in between, out of cycle. There's not a lot of those, so I want to play that down a little bit. The process exists for doing it. And we have, I finally told them, don't print them. You know, you're killing too many trees. Let's just set up a laptop, and we'll look at all the changes that you've made. But on the quarterly releases, we are catching up with incorporating new things, maybe in IAVA, maybe there's just something that needs to be changed or updated from the vendor, whatever. But it's a fairly fast refresh cycle by having the quarterly release. So that maintenance piece takes a lot of technical expertise, because we're talking about the subject matter experts going back in many cases looking. We'll make administrative changes as well and clean up a document if it wasn't perfect. But the main thing is it's below the scenes, kind of low glory work, but you need to be able to count on it that it's doing what it says it's supposed to do. So that maintenance piece is in there. Then I want to move to the part that I'm getting a lot of pressure on. Maybe I'll have some comments on this. Maybe I'll have some vendors interested. And that is the view of STIG automation. Now, I'm going to, believe it or not, I'm not going to go through every one of these steps. You can look back over it. I have a little bit of narrative that will go with this. But the main pieces of this that I wanted to bring out is we're still talking about that hierarchical approach, and we're using Security Content Automation Protocol, some people call it SCAP, in order to, it is a standards-based approach to developing cybersecurity configuration guidance, publish the guidance, assess assets, and report compliance. So we're talking about both producing and consuming. And this is what we like to have our tools working with, so that we can use this to get automated output to assist with continuous monitoring, if you care about that, to have a report that you may keep for use for, I don't know, certification, something that would be with inspection results. So my goal in the automation arena is to automate everything that's automatable. There will always be things in the STIG world, policy documents, inspecting PDSs and looking at cipher locks and, you know, that sort of thing. There's always going to be things that are not automatable. But for the most part, I want to automate everything that we can for us to be able to keep up with what we're trying to do. And one of the things that I need to do, I haven't done yet, it's not really on my plate to do, but it needs to be done, is I can take all this content, this great STIG content, and automate it and get it in a fashion that it's easy to use and easy to store results and track results and get trending and metrics and all the things that we care about. And I have a great metrics team that does all that for the command cyber readiness inspections. My team does that metrics tracking. But, you know, there's people say, I was called down to, I'd been to the Pentagon, and I went over to Fort Meade, and somebody needs automation, STIG automation, and they need it, they're in Italy. And you just wouldn't believe those guys in Italy, how much trouble this is with no STIG automation. And it's like, oh man, this is bad. So it got late in the afternoon, so it's like later in Italy. We're telling them, I'm hoping you're having a little drink while you're waiting for this to kick off. So I went back over to the headquarters and I started telling them, this is what we've done in automation. This is where the benchmarks are. They work with the enterprise tools, HBSS and ACAS. Just step them through what we did with automation. Gave them a little bit of the history about the gold disk, because we created the gold disk and we distributed the gold disk, which you could also not just check for compliance, but you could remediate as well with the gold disk. And I kind of huffed and puffed, trying to give this guy the Cliff Notes version of STIG automation. And he said, oh, ma'am, we already do all that. We love that. We use it all the time. What I need is a data repository, and I need this to feed into EMAS, and I need to be able to do trending over time so I can see where my problem areas are. And I felt at that moment, I've got this on my plate, and I've got this much of it automated. I think we have 68% of what's automated. So I still have some work to do, but I wasn't getting him everything he needed automated to do his job. So I'm going to have to take that up to where he particularly was worried about certification. I understand that. The STIGs he was using to help with that, to help with risk decisions, but he didn't have an end-to-end way of having that automated. So all you vendors out there that care, you might be taking that as something that the people are looking for, and I'm not doing it. I can feed into it, but I don't necessarily have the final product. So on this security content automation protocol, and if you care to know more about that, go out to the NIST website. There's a lot of good information there. SPAWAR has a good operation that we work with them to do some of our production on SCAP. The benefits is that it enables the vendor community to develop standardized guidance once for use by all communities. So you don't have all this repetitive and one-off and tailored to each different tool. It allows more commercial assessment tools to utilize DoD configuration guidance, and it requires less time to develop and publish additional add-on guidance. So I think by having a standard protocol, you're going to end up with something that is much more reusable, and it makes the tools, you can be somewhat tool agnostic if you're using these SCAP protocols. So by no means finished. It's a work in progress, but we're over the tipping point in terms of way more than half, and we're still working on it all the time. And then the other thing that happens, and I'm glad, but this is another one of those peripheral kinds of activities, the moment that you have some automation and you can do some checking and you can do some trending, then somebody wants a scorecard. And with their scorecard, they want to assign a grade, and then they want to look at accountability. And those are all good things, but you have to have that basic STIG content and then an ability to automate and track it and hopefully, have a repository where you can do it. My metrics team that maintains the metrics for all of the command cyber readiness inspections, they slice and dice that material and get called on very, very frequently. You go testify before Congress or something, you got to have some numbers. You need some narrative to go with your numbers, but you definitely need some metrics. There's a big thrust there. So we are responding to the call on that. Still working it, but we're getting there. I do want to just give you a little bit of a cheat sheet on the side of that one version, one slide. It had the acronyms for this content automation protocol components. They are, first of all, again, just to review the bidding, automated standardized machine consumable security content leveraging several XML protocols. So that's the basis of SCAP. The CPE is the common platform enumeration. The CVE is a common vulnerability enumeration. The CCE is the common configuration enumeration. We all know what XCCDF is. OVAL, we know that that's the language that they're using for this vulnerability assessment. There's a scoring system, CVSS. And OSOL, for those of you who don't know, is I associate typically with remediation. That's where I would go with the OSOL language. Is that, Jackie, is you? The manual checks. Of course, there will always be some things that are manual. Okay, so that's, again, helps us get more automated even when it's a manual check, if you can believe that. So those are this again was NIST standards. So that this is all standards, so that if you're developing a tool or you're using a tool, you've got something that is relatively seamless moving back and forth. All right. Why SCAP? Open standards. It supports many tools. It abstracts the how of what we're doing with regard to secure configuration management. It reduces development time. It is extremely repeatable, non-proprietary. So I can put, if I were going to do something, I just wanted to tell somebody I needed SCAP standards or SCAP capability, they would know what to do. Standard identifiers, less duplication, and it helps facilitate enterprise capability activities. So that's just a little bit of a pitch for automation in general, and then a description of how we do it. I'm running into more and more vendors now that are, endpoint security or whatever, and they are using SCAP, and they may even be using our content, which is good because that means that it's also fairly standard and hopefully very valuable. The benchmarks are our automated content, just to kind of define that. And I'm a little bit disappointed in this slide. Not only does it not have any graphics on it, but when I first made it, the font was about this big, and this entire page was full, because every one of these has lots and lots of versions and lots of releases, and they are automated and they are benchmarks, and we have produced those. So rather than listing every one and then making it into an eye chart, I group them into categories, but be sure that there's a lot under the hood when it comes to the automation associated with these benchmarks. Okay. A few more. You care about this content. I love the content. So if you want to know where to get the content, you can go into our IASC portal, look at the STIGs, look at the content. We have over 16,000 registered users. It gets 920,000 hits per month. So don't let anybody tell you that people don't care about security, because they do. It may not be easy, but they're looking and they're trying. And then we also get some additional support questions off of the automation sessions of about 3,000 a year. And we track those and close them. And in addition to the portal, which is somebody called it a treasure trove one time, and I just kind of co-opted that phrase because it sounded kind of good. But there's a treasure trove of information on the IASC portal. You can get access to over 300 security guides. They are mapped to both Federal NIST 853 and DoD CNSS 1253 IA controls, both manual and automated SCAP content. You can get the Win 10. I'm going to do a plug for Win 10 because all the download documents for Win 10 are out there on IASC as well, and those are very valuable. I also want to refer you to 2 tools that are little homegrown tools that we developed that are very popular. I used to go out and give briefings and talk about STIGs, and people who were developing or PMs would come to me and they would say, Chris, I would use the STIGs if I just knew which STIGs apply. I look out there, I'm supposed to use all these network STIGs. What am I supposed to use? So I was joking at one time that I was going to leave federal service, open a consultancy, and call it Which STIGs Apply, so that somebody could come and just pay me to evaluate what they're doing, and I'll tell you which STIGs apply. But I backed off that because I love being a federal employee. And we put a little trifold. I've got some up here, and there's back some in our booth, but more importantly, it's on the IASC portal, so that I could give you a way to walk through and answer a question, and then it will take you down through the processes. And it starts out with a question. How do you tell which security requirements guides or security technical implementation guides apply for what you're trying to do? And there's a purpose. The purpose is to assist users, communities, in determining what STIGs apply to a particular situation. For example, base camp, post and station, site, facility, network, program, major application, device, network elements, endpoints, mobile device, mainframe, servers, workstations, virtualized or not, vendor product. And so you can go through and talk about what applies to you, and it will give you a better guide to all this treasure trove of information, which in fact could be too much if you're just trying to figure it out. I had several people talking to me about that today. They're trying to do something very unique, and they have to go pick pieces out of various STIGs, and it helps them to know which STIGs they're looking for. The guide itself provides an overview of the STIGs and the SRGs along with the scope, tables of items and technologies to which they are applicable, a pathway to identify, an automated pathway to identify the applicability. It will guide you through a set of questions and processes to create a bulleted collection document containing the SRGs and STIGs that are applicable to the specific situations that you have suggested. Their checkbox, additional content, and then you can work with some macros to tailor it if you want to. The audience this was developed for was developers, engineers, program managers, authorizing officials, ISSOs, IAMs, sysadmins, assessors, inspectors. You go out there, you're trying to inspect. It's nice to be able to click the kinds of stuff you're running into it, and it'll tell you which STIGs apply that you might be doing your assessment again. So it's kind of a quick look, but we've gotten really good feedback from it. We revised it a couple of times based on vendor and user comments, and I'm not asking you to all pick up a piece of cardboard, but you can find it easily online at the IASE portal. The other thing that has been very popular, so popular that it has morphed into many things that it wasn't designed to do, and that's something that we call the STIG Viewer. And the STIG Viewer is another question that it tries to answer. How do you read and work with security requirements guides or security technical implementation guides when they are published in XML and XCCDF? That's a question. The answer is you use the STIG Viewer, because that's going to give you something you can actually read. It's not just going to be tables and tables and code. It's going to be something that's human readable. It's a Java-based application that runs on your workstation. It provides a means to read and work with SRGs and STIGs that are published in XCCDF, and it provides a means to take those manual review checks and upload them in case you're working on a continuous monitoring system, and it helps you display in a human-readable format whatever STIG or whatever SRG you're working with from a zip file. So I think it's just really, really handy. It creates a save point. You can to go out and reload if you're working with the same kinds of things. You can create your own checklists. These are just very, very operationally focused capabilities, because you know how it is when a coder sees a problem, they start writing code. You know, that's what they do to solve problems. And the reviewers and the certifiers were working so hard in trying to figure out this screen was open and this screen was open and what am I supposed to do with it, that we created this particular capability, the STIG Viewer. We've just updated, what do we have, 2.0, 2.2. So it's been out for a little while. And I haven't yet, someone hit me up for where's the mobile version. So note to self, they're still looking for a mobile version of STIG Viewer, and that will be very handy. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to make this stuff easier, because I care about what the operational community, needs. All right, the STIG impact. Over here with me? All right. I think I mentioned to you that we have an incident response and recovery team, and we have some forensics folks working for us, and it is of great interest to me to find out, is there something out there that I don't have covered in a STIG, or I have a STIG but it was too hard. There's some reason why it's too hard. I try to make it easier. And one of the things that particular team, I'm not claiming to cover the whole universe of incidents, but that particular team has indicated to me that the vast majority of the cyber incidents they investigate could have been prevented or greatly mitigated if only the STIGs had been applied. And that's good news in a way, because that tells us we're providing secure configuration guidance for the right things. But I would also say that I have to ask myself, why is this so hard? Why is it so hard that somebody isn't able to keep their systems and networks and their data protected using these STIGs if it covers that much of the landscape? So I have to work on that. Automation's part of it, but it's probably not all of it. Training and resources is part of it, but it's probably not all of it. So I'm trying to crack the nut on if we've got this critical mass of events that were wholly avoidable, if only the STIGs were applied, then I need to figure out a way to make it easier. And I want to be very careful to state, if this were a public health issue, the model would be, we've got the don't smoke and fasten your seat belts part of this. You can have a huge impact on public health if you just do those kinds of things that you know are going to prevent premature death or injury or whatever. There's always going to be sophisticated nation-state actors. We're not going to be able to cover everything in a STIG. I had a great person working for me for a few years, and we were listening to a presentation by Jeff Moss, the premier hacker, and he noticed a couple of steps that it would take to do some pretty harsh things at that particular event and how easy it was for him. And my person who had dedicated her life to this work burst into tears. She said, why am I doing this? I've devoted my life to working this, and it's going to take this guy 20 minutes to break in, or it's going to take the Russians or the Eastern Europeans or the Chinese. Look, let's do cyber discipline. Let's do cyber hygiene. Let's make sure that we have infection control and, we've fastened our seatbelts and we've done all these things that we know we can do and we know how to do it. And then all the talent can focus on these really sophisticated attacks, and we won't have to spend it on doing the things that we know we should do. So I'm only covering, I'll make a guess and say 80% of the landscape. And if we would do all the things that we know to do and know how to do, I think we would be a whole lot better off. I look when there's an event like the entertainment company that lost its sensitive data a while back. The very first thing I did was deconstructed that so I could see if they had STIGs and if they had followed them, would this have been preventable? And the answer was clearly yes. I know we've had a massive data breach that affects a whole bunch of people that has got a lot of publicity. Following STIGs would not have been a cure-all. There's culture issues, there's architecture issues, there always are, but following the STIGs as laid out helps to mitigate those kinds of events, which are extremely disruptive and extremely expensive. So I'm thinking that the impact is what I care about. Rapid response, real-time cyber attacks. We try to adjust the STIGs whenever we can. We do that, both industry and government. I love public-private partnerships. I think together we're stronger than either of us are working separately. I think it's a good business case for you. I think it's a good use of the taxpayer's dollar when it comes to paying my salary. So I want to work with everybody, and I want everybody to get a full hour's CPE credit for this presentation, and I want to make sure that we get 3 minutes for questions. I think that's it, and I really appreciate having the opportunity. This is my favorite subject, and I don't let go of the podium easily, so they're going to have to pry me away from it. Questions? Comments? Ricky, do you have any questions? Jackie, do you have any questions? No? You have a question? Microphone, maybe? Yeah.
They no longer apply. I mean, if you're doing it at the control level, right, and addressing all the applicable controls, and those are all addressed in that vendor STIG, seems to me there wouldn't be other STIGs and SRGs that would be applied.
That is very likely would be the case, and that it becomes, you just help me make my case, So instead of this large network company saying I've got to look at 10 or 15 different STIGs, let me work with you, and we'll get one that I know that if I do all this, I have met the male. So, Jackie, we're all shaking our head yes. So there's yet another, it could be something, and I want to say 100%, but way the vast majority would be, we would not need something else. Uh-huh. I should have had you at a microphone. But yeah, there can be some, depending on how it's structured, there might be some other STIGs that applied, but you would cover the vast majority of the landscape by doing it that way. Any questions, comments? I'm good? Everybody walks out past the barcode reader and gets credit, right? Okay. And you've got my contact information. You see the URLs. You know where to go. You've got some brochures. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your interest. It's been fun.
Thanks, Mr. McKinney.
Uh-huh.